All right, we welcome you to the Ferris Show on television. We'll keep up the view of Bedminster, New Jersey, awaiting the former president's remarks on anti-Semitism. He will undoubtedly talk about how he can't believe anybody who is Jewish could possibly vote for Kamala Harris. See what else he has to say in a few minutes. But first tonight, everything old in a way is now new again. Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are both playing the same game. They're hearkening back to the old playbook. Harris is using 2020 as a playbook, if you will. It's not running from the basement, but it's kind of like running from a glass bubble. That everyone can look at Kamala Harris and hear her, but she will take no questions. You can't get close. Might leave voters wanting more, but it, of course, limits unforced errors. Meanwhile, Trump wants to recapture the magic of 2016.
Now Kamala is reportedly proposing communist price controls. She wants price controls. And if they worked, I'd go along with it, too. But they don't work. They actually have the exact opposite impact and effect. But it leads to food shortages, rationing, hunger.
All right, so most notably, Donald Trump brought back today the man behind his 2016 run for the White House, Corey Lewandowski. That's along with his old communications director from 2020 and a few others. Lewandowski's a friend of NewsNation, particularly our show, and he's often said to us, no matter what, Trump should just be Trump. All right, we don't have that soundbite. Trump being Trump worked in 2016. It did not work in 2020. One thing that is clear, Trump's campaign is most certainly telling him to stay on message. And in the 88 minutes today that he held his press conference, he basically did. This whole afternoon, he talked mostly about the economy at his press conference in Bedminster. When a strong point about the real concerns of fully abandoning fossil fuels came up, well, he perhaps meandered off just a little bit.
Do you want to see a bird cemetery? Just go under a windmill. You see thousands of birds dead. The bald eagle, if you kill an eagle, they put you in jail for years. And yet these windmills knock them out like nothing. And nothing happens to the people.
Trump supporters say he makes those types of comments to get media attention and refocus the race. For example, Trump's comments this afternoon may get more coverage than Harris's major economic announcement and celebration today, and then her policy speech tomorrow. So yes, Trump is now back to being Trump, full Trump. If you believe the polls, though, it is not working. George Will is here, NewsNation senior political contributor, Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist. Welcome, and on the new set, sir. Glad to have you back.
Very lavish.
Yes, plush but not overly ostentatious. Part of being a successful politician is meeting voters where they're at. Does the country look more like when Donald Trump won in 2016 with his strategy and being Trump, or more like 2020 when Joe Biden won from the basement?
I think it looks like 2024, which is not either of those things, and that's something Mr. Trump's having a very difficult time coming to grips with. Leland, he's been nominated 3 consecutive times by the Republican Party. It's never happened before. Since he came down the escalator in June 2015, he has been the center of American politics for more than 9 years. And it's beginning, some people think, to get stale.
Well, we'll see. He's now on the stump again with a Jewish event at Bedminster. Introductions beginning there. You can see Miriam Adelson, the big donor, one of the largest donors in the Republican Party for this event. We'll wait until the president takes the stage. You're seeing a realignment in American politics. I think that is very clear. It started perhaps in 2016 with working men and women. Now we're seeing it with the Jewish vote in America realigning. Where are there opportunities for Donald Trump now in the next 90 days?
He has to find some people who aren't already with him and talk to them. I watched NewsNation carried his speech the other night. On and on he went. I heard nothing new. He's got the people, Leland, they're like deadheads, the kind of people who follow the Grateful Dead from one concert to another.
I'm familiar with the concept.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Barton Swaim of the Wall Street Journal met someone at a Trump rally in North Carolina who said it was his 85th Trump rally. Think about that. It's a cult, it's entertainment, it's fun, it's tribal, it's warm, it's a community, but it doesn't expand anything.
Right. Elections are additive. That's what we always figured out. That's what Donald Trump figured out in 2016 when he realized that he could add to typical Republican voters white working class voters. Part of what he did in that was turn Hillary Clinton into a villain. And he really led that charge. People forget how unpopular he made her. He's trying to do that with Kamala Harris about the issues. Take a listen.
I think that we're hitting a nerve. I think this is a different kind of a race. All we have to do is define our opponent as being a communist or a socialist or somebody that's going to destroy our country.
That's pretty strong language. Communists destroy the country. I'm not sure that people are going to buy that. They might find it more plausible to say she's not wise, she's not what we need. She would make government more oppressive, regulatory, and annoying. But destroy the country? Maybe they ought to turn down the rheostat of the rhetoric just a bit.
Well, if we just want to be fair in terms of how it worked, in 2016, people told him to turn it down, and he kept turning it up, and it worked.
But remember, Hillary Clinton had already run and failed against Barack Obama in 2008. We'd already road tested that candidacy and found that she was a weak candidate from the get-go.
Well, to be fair, Kamala Harris already ran and failed in 2019.
Exactly.
And road tested, and she failed a lot earlier than Hillary Clinton did.
Yes.
She didn't even make it to Iowa. There is a theory that the Trump campaign is working with, is by doing these press conferences and by having these events, it is drawing attention to the fact that Kamala Harris is giving speeches on the teleprompter and then taking precisely 0 questions from the media, which is pretty stunning for a presidential candidate, any presidential candidate, but especially one at this moment in the campaign. I wonder if Donald Trump would not be better off doing this, having his rallies, having media availabilities where he says all the things he wants to say and then turn around and walk inside. And when the media complains, you say, we'll take questions when Kamala Harris does.
That's one approach to it, but his approach right now is probably wise. That is, he's taking questions promiscuously. What was it, 85 minutes today? So
I just want to mark the time, 7:07 on August 15th. George Will says what Donald Trump is doing is wise.
Yes, a first. But in the sense that the contrast is striking, that he will say anything to anyone at any time, and she will say nothing to anyone ever. And that's deadly. She is allowing there to grow a narrative that's the first chink in the armor, and if you will, the first subtraction from the momentum that she's been able to get from the media, which is now feeling slighted.
You know, he called her a communist, socialist. He also talked about her as intelligence. He's made fun of her laugh. And he is called a racist, a bigot, and a sexist for doing those things. Yet, we got a press release today from the Kamala Harris campaign making fun of Donald Trump on a whole host of issues. They've called him weird for weeks, on and on and on. What is the double standard of who can attack who?
The question is, does the country want a campaign between two people who sound like third graders on the playground, calling each other names? I don't think so. I think the country is exhausted by this and is hungry for some sign of adult comportment in public life. So
elections are about the future. We're going to hear Kamala Harris with her beginning her economic plan. We're seeing Donald Trump talking. I guess they didn't even have the wide shut up, but there was a whole set of tables around him filled with food products. Is it good enough to say, were you better off under me or were you better off under Biden?
It worked once. The question is, can you recycle that? That was one of the great lines in Ronald Reagan's one debate with Jimmy Carter in 2000 and in 1980. I'm not sure it works again this time. The answer is clear. People don't feel they're better off. The question is, the challenge is to Kamala Harris to say, I'm different, because she's gone out of her way to say, I'm not different at this point.
Well, she's gone out of her way to say both, right? She said that that Kamala-omics are different than Bidenomics, but that I want to extend the wins and everything else of the Biden administration. I want to get back to the personal attacks because it's been such a hallmark of the Donald Trump campaigns in 2016 and in 2020. Here he is. I'm entitled to personal attacks.
I think I'm entitled to personal attacks. I don't have a lot of respect for her. I don't have a lot of respect for her intelligence. She certainly attacks me personally. She actually called me weird. He's weird. It was just a soundbite. And she called JD and I weird.
You say that the country has to decide if it wants third graders on the playground, which this sort of is becoming. Certainly among J.D. Vance and Tim Walz is becoming third graders on the playground. But the reason that is because it's been focus grouped, it's been tested, it drives donations, especially small dollar donations, and it gets thunderous applause at the rallies.
But it will, I think, move no independent voter. Now, serious people argue as to how large that genuinely movable portion of the population is. The estimates go from 5% to 15%. But in elections recently have been decided by less than that. So the question is, can either of these candidates go beyond their base? Donald Trump is throwing red meat to his base, and they're loving it.
You say they're loving it. The polling says that he may have reached the capacity of how much they love it. And we put this up yesterday with the caveat that amateurs in politics, right, amateurs talk about the overall head-to-head horse race. It's the nerds who talk about things like voter enthusiasm. Enthusiasm among Democrats skyrockets after Joe Biden gets out. Among independents, it goes up substantially. That may be where we're seeing this shift towards Kamala Harris. Among Republicans, it is a straight line at 71%.
Because he's a familiar act. He's an entertainer, always has been, and there's a brilliant...
And a good one at it.
Yes, he's terrific at it. He has that kind of borscht belt timing of a good stand-up comedian. But once you've seen their act, Leland, you know what killed vaudeville? It was television. Vaudeville used to take their act from Toledo to Fort Wayne to Peoria to Grand Junction, Colorado. It was fresh everywhere it went. And then television came along, put all the acts on at once. People had seen that, need something new. And I think Mr. Trump, the entertainer, is suffering from excessive exposure.
Yeah, overexposure can kill anybody, can kill anything, no matter how good it is. It's why we're only on 1 hour a night. It's why you're only here once a week. It's good to see you, sir.
Good to see you.
Thank you very much. One Democratic senator says he is going to Pearl Jam, yes, a concert, rather than the Democratic National Convention, why Kamala Harris's rise in the polls may not be exactly what it's cracked up to be. And take a look at this. The Taliban mocks U.S. taxpayers with a parade of $7 billion worth of weapons left behind 3 years ago when the Biden administration cut and run from Kabul. We'll tell you why everything we were told wouldn't happen did. Welcome back. We have heard about the massive new enthusiasm in the Democratic Party for Kamala Harris, and that is totally changing the race for control of the United States Senate. President's a big deal. Control of the House and Senate tells you everything. Just ask Joe Biden, who's had such a hard time getting anything done the past 2 years. In the Senate, if the Senate goes Republican and Kamala Harris is president, boy, think about judges, anything getting passed of meaning. So this is control of the Senate. DDHQ Senate forecast gives it 51 to the Republicans, 46 to the Democrats. That leaves 3 toss-ups: Arizona, Michigan, and Ohio. What is stunning right now is that the Democratic National Convention starts on Monday, and the Senate's 3 most vulnerable Democrats, these are incumbent Democrats, are skipping the DNC. Okay, Nevada Jackie Rosen is skipping. She says, I don't need to come to my own convention, even though Kamala Harris has been in Nevada. John Tester of Montana, very conservative Democrat. He is skipping the DNC to, wait for it, go to nothing else than a Pearl Jam concert rather than raise money. Senator Sherrod Brown of Ohio, huge state, important state. He's not going as well. All 3 of these people have incredibly difficult races. Kurt Bardella, NewsNation contributor, host of Kurt's Country. Scott Traynor, director of data science, Decision Desk HQ, is with us. Scott, have we been able to change this map and factor in, for lack of a better term, the Kamala Harris factor?
So we are in the process of doing that. We need some more polling, but let me give you a little preview of what I think we're going to show when we see it next week. I think we're going to see the races in Ohio, Michigan, and Wisconsin tighten up, simply because Joe Biden is not going to be bringing down the top of the ticket. We're going to see some of these tighten up potentially in Arizona and Nevada, and it's all going to come down to Montana and West Virginia, which are still going to be solidly on the Republican side, just given how Republican-leaning those states are.
All right, Kurt Bardella, why on earth is Jackie Rosen of Nevada skipping the DNC when all we hear is how much enthusiasm and how great Kamala Harris is for Democrats?
Yeah, I hate these decisions. I hate when we have people operate from a position of weakness and not strength. I hate when they try to create the appearance of distance by not going to a convention as if that's going to actually matter or make anyone think you're less supportive of the Democratic nominee for president, who's going to be spending a lot of time, I suspect, in the state of Nevada, putting a lot of money in the state of Nevada. The idea that you can create distance and that the talking point of, well, I didn't go to the convention doesn't tie you to the top of the ticket is such a fallacy, in my opinion. So I'd rather them own it, go there, have a show of strength, make the best of it. Instead, they're doing the Democrat thing, which is to hide and cower.
Does it matter if you go to the convention or not?
It doesn't matter. In fact, it's a pretty good talking point that she's going to a concert. So I actually
John Tester, the guy going.
Yeah,
he's going to Pearl Jam. We have what it is. Yeah. Rock on John, a Missoula fundraiser for John Tester, Pearl Jam's concert at the University of Montana.
Yeah, well, he needs those types of sound bites because he's behind. So is Jackie Rosen in terms of fundraising, things like that. Republicans are coming down strong now. They're both ahead in the polls right now. But I think actually right before we came on today, there was a brand new Senate poll that had she a couple points ahead. So those races are tightening.
It seems like the Nevada race is maybe one of the most interesting, and it would decide perhaps not in whether the Republicans have the Senate or not, but whether they have a 1 or 2 vote cushion, whether they can afford a defection.
Exactly, afford a defection, right? If you have 53, 54 as Republicans, you can get a lot of people appointed to the cabinet. If it's close, 51, then you don't get a final say, but you get a say in who's in the cabinet. So those seats are going to be incredibly important.
Yeah, if all of a sudden Republicans have 53, 54, 55 votes in the Senate, then they can really twist Kamala Harris's arm if she's president.
And Supreme Court seats.
Supreme Court seats and all the other federal judges. Sam Brown is running in Nevada. Pretty interesting candidate. Private businessman, and before that he was an Army officer. Take a listen.
Look at my face. This is the high cost of war. This is absurd. This is unacceptable. Our daughters will not be forced into a draft. You should be ashamed of yourself, Jackie Rosen.
How closely tied, Sam Brown has tied himself totally to Donald Trump. How closely tied is Jackie Rosen to what was the Joe Biden agenda and now the Kamala Harris agenda?
Well, I think the Joe Biden agenda, she was trying to avoid it simply because she needed to have some separation, specifically in the economy. That's why Donald Trump, while Joe Biden was candidate, came in and said no taxes on tips. I think she's trying to figure out where Kamala Harris is going to come down. And we saw Kamala Harris last week say, hey, no taxes on tips. She's taking up that mantle. So I think she's trying to figure it out because she knows it's going to be a closer race than the polls show today.
Yeah, and we can all agree, right, that all of these races for Democrats look an awful lot better than they did a month ago when Joe Biden dropped out. They look a lot better for Democrats. That's something he talked about. Take a listen.
Look, the polls we had showed that it was a neck-and-neck race. Would have been down to the wire. But what happened was a number of my Democratic colleagues in the House and Senate thought that I was going to hurt them in the races.
So much of the oxygen is taken up by Donald Trump and Kamala Harris now. Are we missing, Kurt, how important to Democrats trying to keep the Senate close is?
Yeah, I think it's vitally important. Again, for the reasons you already enumerated, judges, appointments, Supreme Court justices, cabinet appointees, confirmations, all of that runs through the Senate. And there is a big difference functionally from having a 3 to 4 seat cushion or having maybe only a 1 seat cushion.
Right, so if we put the map back up so we can show everybody, somehow we went to the wrong screen. But if we think about it right now, Scott, if Montana and West Virginia go to Republicans, which it looks like almost certainly it will.
Safe bets.
They're now at 51.
Yeah, they're there.
51, they're there. The question is whether you pick up Ohio, Nevada, where else?
Arizona, maybe. The Democrats are going to tell you that they've got strong candidates and closer polls in Florida and Texas. I don't think they're going to be able to pull it off there, but they're certainly going to make a run for it. That's where places where
Democrats try to pick it up. All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. Good to see both of you. Vice President Harris is set to lay out her economic plan for Americans, why she claims price controls. Yeah, she says they're going to work in America after it brought red lines to the Soviet Union. Last night, a bunch of pro-Palestinian protesters stormed a Democratic event in New York City. You could call it a small taste of what's to come at next week's Democratic National Convention in Chicago. Chicago authorities are preparing for massive protests in the hope of avoiding a 1968 rerun. Joining us now, Niall Stanage, White House columnist for our partners at The Hill. Good to see you, my friend.
Good to see you.
Just in terms of looking forward to the DNC, biggest difference right now, right, is that in 68, the Mayor Daley, was with the police. In Chicago, the mayor there now, Brandon Johnson, is with the protesters. How worried is the White House, Kamala Harris's team, Democrats at all, that that's going to be the split screen? Video we saw last night and Kamala Harris speaking.
There's no question that there are going to be big protests here, and this is an issue that, as you and I have spoken about before, divides the Democratic Party base in particular down the middle. In fact, the base is now increasingly pro-Palestinian. So I think there are two things. There's the substance of the dispute, but there's also the possibility of scenes of disorder, and wherever one falls on the dispute, scenes of disorder don't tend to help you win elections.
Right. The flip side of this is Kamala Harris made a great point. If you want to keep talking like that, elect Donald Trump. Otherwise, I'm the nominee, I'm speaking, let's move on. Is this really a big enough movement and enough people who are going to stay home and not vote rather than vote for Kamala Harris over Donald Trump?
I think that there can be a genuine sliver of opinion here that does stay home, particularly in crucial states. Michigan is the one that is most often cited. And look, you and I both agree on one part here, which is that the protests hurt the electability. But a lot of those protesters, they're not trying to win elections. They are responding to what they consider a moral issue and one that they want to express their outrage about.
And no question, they are outraged. Whether as you say, we can disagree on the facts of that. There is a problem I see though for the Democratic Party that was traditionally got 75%, 80% of the Jewish vote now. You've got Donald Trump holding an event at Bedminster with a large contingent of Jewish donors, talking about the anti-Semitism problem in America. Kamala Harris Democrats are handcuffed from even talking about the anti-Semitism problem, lest they upset these folks.
Well, I don't know. I think we may be disagreeing there again, because I think President Biden certainly has cited anti-Semitism as a problem. It is true that Harris has tried to be rhetorically more considerate or sensitive of the pro-Palestinian folks, but she has stated that she remains committed to Israel.
No, she has stated that, but I think rhetorically, and you make a good point, that she's getting closer to the new generation of Democrats than she is to Joe Biden, the old generation of Democrats. Columbia University's president just resigned because of the protests there. Big ruling out of UCLA today that Jewish students cannot be denied access to classes in an attempt to sort of appease the pro-Palestinian types. What is the concern among the White House that they get behind this and lose control of these protests of this issue going into November?
Well, I think there's two things. I think there's just the scenes that are reminiscent of 68. If you have protesters clashing with police, right, if you've bigger trouble. But the other point is, we have seen enthusiasm be a problem for Democrats. Here you have a segment of the party or a segment of the party base that is having that enthusiasm undermined because they disagree so strongly with policy on Israel. And if you try to ameliorate that problem, another problem pops up, perhaps with more pro-Israel voters in the center ground.
The panacea was going to be a ceasefire before the DNC, right? I'm old enough to remember it was, I think, April, you and I were having this conversation, that Joe Biden said, oh, ceasefire is upon us. They desperately wanted it. It still hasn't gotten there, to try and blunt this coming issue in Chicago. That's not going to happen. We can see that. Is there anything, though, that Kamala Harris can do between now and November to appease or to promise to appease these folks?
I don't really think realistically there is. That promise of a ceasefire, you remember President Biden said it would happen by Monday about 20 or 25 Mondays ago, and there's still no sign of it.
He didn't specify which Monday. I don't.
Maybe he meant a Monday in November. But look, I mean, I think that the problem for Harris is you have a segment of the party that, as I say, is genuinely outraged, would like her to, for example, enact an arms embargo on Israel. I don't think there's any realistic possibility of that happening.
Well,
they're going to continue being dissatisfied.
Or realistic possibility she's willing to say it before November. Who knows what she does after November. Niall, good to see you, my friend.
Good to see you.
Thank you as always. NewsNation special coverage of the DNC starts next week. Monday, we'll take the show on the road, 7 p.m. Eastern from the United Center. Kamala Harris is prepared to offer $25,000 now to first-time homebuyers. Is that enough? Where's she getting the money when we come back? You will hear that again at the DNC on Monday night, and probably never again, because Kamala Harris does not mention Joe Biden in her stump speech. President Biden and his hand-picked successor held their first event today since he dropped out. It's been about a month. In a nod to his health, it was early afternoon in Maryland, not exactly during a barnstorming victory lap around swing states. They wanted to celebrate something big. This was their one moment to celebrate a huge accomplishment. They could have picked anything to highlight. They picked lowering prescription drug prices. Kind of. The White House fact sheet says American taxpayers are expected to save $6 billion on prescription drug costs, and people enrolled in Medicare are expected to save $1.5 billion in out-of-pocket costs in 2026, celebrating something that won't take effect for 2 years. So let's show you what they really decided to celebrate when they passed the torch. This is their big moment. In 2023, Medicare will spend $832 billion. This won't take effect till 2026, so then Medicare will be spending even more. But let's just take today's dollars. The signature event of the Biden-Harris administration realized a 0.6, I will do the math correctly in my head, a 0.6% savings in Medicare. So we'll put that in real terms, because $6 billion sounds like a lot of money. It is a lot of money. But that is the same, 0.6%, as someone offering you a $6 coupon for a new iPhone. $6 coupon for an iPhone 2 years from now. But to be fair, the people who take these drugs, some of them will save big. For example, the 3 million people who take the diabetes drug Jardiance will save $376 per month. Won't happen for 2 years. So nobody's felt any of the effects of these savings. Tomorrow, Harris will roll out some more bold economic policies, like going after airline bag fees, credit card rates, and price gouging in supermarkets. We received a preview of her proposal. She's calling for construction of 3 million new homes in 4 years, tax incentives for building starter homes, a federal fund for housing construction, a $25,000 down payment for first-time home buyers, and a cap on rent hikes. Trish Regan's here, former Goldman Sachs analyst and co-founder of the investment firm 76 Research. Trish, it is good to see you. Thank you. All right.
Good to see you. My blood's like boiling. You know, like this is tough for a capitalist to see on the screen.
Well, to be fair, though, in terms of government helping, at least in the housing crisis, this is not that much different, is it, than what Eisenhower did in the 50s as the middle class expanded?
Here's what I'm going to tell you, Leland. It's not that hard to figure out. You give everybody $25,000 to go out and buy their first home. You've just jacked the price up by $25,000 for everybody's first home. It's the same as the student loan thing. They can't figure out why student loan costs are so high, why college costs are so high. Guys, it's because you gave a bunch of kids a blank check and said, hey, go take out as much money as you need to take out. And they did. And this is the byproduct. So you want more housing inflation, you put in rent control, you give everybody $25,000. Gosh, it sounds good, right? This is like straight out of the Latin American playbook. I can think of a country, Venezuela, who offered things like this. This is Chavez-style stuff. And I don't mean to be alarmist, but when you're talking about her, she's got another plan. She's going to cap grocery prices. She thinks that the grocery stores are gouging everyone. My colleague over at 76 Research and I, we were looking at some of these bigger retailers and these grocery chains and the consumer staple companies. And the reality is, guess what? They're paying more for everything as well. And they can't pass as many of those costs on as they would like. So their profitability margins suffer. I mean, it's not rocket science, but the woman does not understand economics, period.
Understand perhaps what people are looking for right now is a little bit of some kind of hope and not doom and gloom. 46% of Americans consider themselves to be broke. 66% living paycheck to paycheck. Latest polling from New York Times Siena College. Harris trails Trump 7% among working class voters in battleground states, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. Those are voters without a college degree. That number was significantly higher when it was Trump-Biden. For Donald Trump. There is something about what Kamala Harris is talking about in the economy that resonates. What is it?
Populism. I mean, none of this is going to work, Leland. None of it. And that 0.6% reference number that you gave us on the prescription drugs, I mean, if you actually look at that adjusted for inflation, my hunch is like you're losing money there, okay? So none of this is going to work. But you know what? It sounds really good. Because everybody wants somebody to blame. Oh, we can just blame those big grocery store chains. We can just blame this company and that. It's corporate America. It's great. Look, don't get me wrong. Capitalism is not perfect. And there are definitely ways that we can improve things. I think the middle class has really gotten shafted effectively over the last however many years. And that does need to change. And there's ways you can do it to equal out the capital labor equation. But, Leland, you don't just say, well, we're going to ditch capitalism. We're going to put in rent controls. You know, you can't. Look, that didn't turn out so well for New York City. That's why you have huge, huge rent costs in New York City. I mean, they're still living down some of these things. Thomas Sowell has written, The Economist, quite a bit on that. Look, the reality is this. You just can't reinvent this. I mean, there's a reason why America is America. And I'd love to see somebody with a sense of how a business works, with a sense of how capitalism works, putting in the right things to just unleash what we know how to do already, and that's to succeed.
Okay, so you think about her economic policies: increase loans for small businesses, eliminate junk fees. Eliminating junk fees are great until companies raise prices, and then you pay the same amount because they're not going to make less money. Cancel student loan debt. We've seen how that goes. Expand the child tax credit. That's something J.D. Vance wants to do as well. Cap on prescription drug prices, curb rent hikes, raise corporate taxes, tax on crypto holders. I'm wondering, you know, when you talk about the price controls of the grocery store thing, and there was a congressman on the Hill earlier, I don't know if we have the soundbite about talking basically of trying to set prices in one way or the government doing that. Tell me if I'm wrong here. Either the price controls are meaningless, like saying you can't have junk fees, well, therefore people just raise the airfares, for example, when it comes to airlines. So they're either meaningless or it's Venezuela.
It is Venezuela. It's socialism on steroids. And look, like, this hasn't ever worked. Like, we've tried it. Like, FDR tried it, right? And it wasn't until World War II came along and there were other reasons why we were able to get out of the challenges we were in. But they tried price controls before. It actually sunk us deeper into that depression. The reality is, you got to take a page out of Milton Friedman's book. But this is a woman, her dad was a post-Keynesian economist from Stanford. I suspect this is sort of in her DNA, right? She believes very passionately
it's the Great Society, it's
in
the utopia,
big government doing more.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to tell you, big government is never the answer. The answer is the individual and the market and people making their own decisions. I mean, that's why we are the world's #1 economy, and I certainly hope we stay that way. Venezuela's a great example. Look, I remember I was actually at Goldman when Hugo Chavez first came to power, and we're like, okay, maybe this won't be so bad. We were actually really worried about Lula in Brazil at the time because we were trading emerging debt markets. And Lula, we thought would be really problematic. He was super left. I mean, Chavez was too, but okay, maybe it will work.
Trish, when we're getting into it, Trish, when we're getting into the history
but in 20 years' time, Leland, look at where Venezuela has gone. From the #1 economy in all of Latin America to the poorest. Per capita income is absolutely miserable, and that's the result of socialist policies.
All right. Well, you have laid out a choice. And look, to be fair, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris are laying out basically the same choice. Trish, good to see you. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. You haven't heard much about the southern border lately. That doesn't mean we aren't reporting on it. The frantic search to find a Palestinian bomb maker who is trying to get across the border. Ali Bradley on the hunt when we come back. All right, so this is a Taliban military parade 3 years after taking over the country. If we had cut the right video, the parade would consist mostly of U.S. military hardware, some of the up-armored Humvees and the MRAPs, billions of dollars worth of equipment that we paid for. And now it's in the hands of the same terrorists who gave harbor to Osama bin Laden. And for those of you wondering, yes, the Taliban figured out how to fly all the helicopters, including, wait for it, American Black Hawk helicopters. It's hard to imagine. 3 years ago, this picture was on our TV screens. It was one of the worst moments in American history. Worse still, we left people behind. Brave Afghans who fought alongside American troops, many of whom have now faced the brutal retribution by the Taliban. 3 years ago. You might remember how then President Biden characterized the withdrawal.
The United States ended 20 years of war in Afghanistan, the longest war in American history. We completed one of the biggest airlifts in history. The extraordinary success of this mission was due to the incredible skill, bravery, and selfless courage of the United States military and our diplomats and intelligence professionals.
13 Americans died when a suicide bomber blew himself up at Abbey Gate. They didn't need to. By all accounts, massive failures in leadership led to their deaths, including, and perhaps most significantly, the handcuffing of the military by President Biden for political reasons. When Mr. Biden met the caskets at Dover, he looked at his watch on the tarmac. Americans don't like people to die in vain. We don't like to be embarrassed. We don't leave people behind. That was the beginning of the end of the Biden presidency. In mid-August, his approval numbers went underwater. He never recovered. In addition to the tens of billions of dollars in weapons, the Taliban took control of the prisons in Afghanistan. They flung open the doors and let members of the world's worst terrorist organizations run wild. Mr. Biden's Afghanistan crisis coincided with the border crisis starting on our southern border. We still have no idea how many members of ISIS, the Taliban, Hezbollah, Hamas, or other organizations have come to America and are waiting. This week, the Border Patrol arrested one Palestinian who served jail time in Israel for making bombs. His name is Omar Shahida. And they put out a warning to look for another Palestinian named Issa Darafat, who is trying to make it across. He also has a terrorist background. Ali Bradley is in Del Rio, Texas, as the search continues. Hi, Ali.
Yeah, hey, Leland. Obviously, we're talking about two very concerning individuals here. The first one that you mentioned, they're apprehended by Border Patrol after he was on that terrorist screening database for like you said, making bombs, explosives, or use of firearms. So here's what we know here. Omar Shaheda, he crossed the southern border illegally in the Santa Teresa area. This is New Mexico in the El Paso sector, and he was arrested on Monday. Now, he was convicted in Israel for, quote, producing a weapon and explosives material or ammunition. He was sentenced to 20 months in prison. Now, it is arrests like that that is prompting DHS to sound the alarm and to put out other alerts that more could be coming. The agency kicking out this alert here, this bolo that we have, to agents and officers to be on the lookout for Issa Musa Darafat. Sources confirm that he is from the West Bank. He is on a terrorist screening database, and he has been refused entry to the United States multiple times. The feds have been watching this guy for at least 2 months. They've been watching him since the beginning of July. The alert agents say if they encounter him, they are supposed to take everything from him, Leland. They're supposed to take the trash out of his pockets. That's how dangerous they think this man is. Now, they are also directed to contact the Tactical Terrorist Response Team if they do encounter him. Right now, they're keeping a close eye on the Santa Teresa area. Again, that is New Mexico. That is the end of the El Paso sector. But what's interesting here, and that is also where Shahada was also apprehended. What's interesting here, though, I've talked to agents in the Del Rio sector, which is nearby. We're only about 4 hours from El Paso as a crow flies. And I've talked to sheriffs down here. And Leland, none of them were alerted. And they're kind of frustrated because they feel like if this is such a big deal, it's such a big issue, and they're dealing with gotaways down here, maybe they should know that that individual might cross into their sector or might be in their county in a vehicle being smuggled through. So there's a little bit of frustration down here on the front lines, Leland.
Unbelievable and confounding why you had to find out about this through sources and why it's not being publicly broadcast. 20 or 30 seconds, Ali, any idea how these people got from getting out of prison in Israel, conceivably released into the West Bank, to our border?
Well, the guy that they're looking for right now, as in Darafat, he doesn't have a criminal history that we could find other than being convicted for throwing rocks back in the early 2000s in Israel. So he has tried to get into the United States, but we've refused his entry. So he has, like I said, tried, but they're not allowing it. So that's why they believe he's going to come in undetected, that he's going to try to evade, and that is the issue, Leland.
Stay on it. Ali Bradley, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Tomorrow on the program, who is the real Kamala Harris? Depending on which news media organization you watch, 2 or 3 very different people. We'll give you the fair assessment tomorrow.